All right, g'day folks. Welcome to For Wild Places 14th Trail Chat. My name's Will. My pronouns are he, him. I am based on the beautiful Dharawal lands in South Coast, New South Wales, Port Kembla to be specific. And we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. The trails we love always were and always will be Aboriginal land. For Wild Places is an activist running group. We seek to protect the wild places we love to run in, and we want more runners to care about people and planet. We organise these trails chats once a month or so with special guests to talk about running, sports activism, but also life and dogs and food and chocolate, wherever they go. We are stoked this month to bring to you a special guest all the way from the beautiful and traditional land of the Coast Salish people. Hoping the pronunciation there is accurate. Seattle, Washington State. Our guest currently serves as the Vice President of Seattle Frontrunners, an LGBTQIA+ running and walking club, and they're working with the larger running community to expand access to non-binary athletes. They wrote the guide to non-binary inclusion in running in the spring of 2022, and after publishing this guide, went on to consult for major marathons, including the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. They also founded Run Beyond, RUNN+, in 2022, a community for non-binary athletes to exist, participate, advocate, and represent. So without further ado, a wild welcome to Jake Fedorowski. Hi, Jake.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. Thank you. It's noon here. We're laughing, but it's after work, 7 p.m., almost bedtime for you. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here and to have a conversation with y'all.
Awesome. So Jake, we usually start. We usually have a few questions back and forth, and then there's space for other folks to ask questions if they would like. A little bit of a heads up to folks on this call. We also have a special surprise later in the chat that I haven't disclosed to any of my colleagues. Apologies. So yeah, you have to hang on the chat and wait for that. But before we get to some convos about the important work you're doing, Jake, first question, how are you doing and what are you up to?
I'm tired. I am excited, and I guess I'm looking forward to many things. It's a very complex situation in the sense that we were just talking about, Pride Month has just been, we're already halfway through Pride Month, and, the first couple of weeks have just been super busy, both in my personal life, my professional life, my advocate life, my running life. And there's still more to go, right? There's still two and a half more weeks to go of Pride Month, and I'm just looking forward to all the exciting opportunities that are upcoming. Some of the things that I've been working on, in addition to the things that you listed at the beginning, we meaning a group of advocates and queer runners in the industry, just came together last month and launched the Queer Running Society, which is an organization that is basically elevating the queer experience in the running industry, right? Trying to bring all of the wonderful queer running communities around the United States that are popping up and bringing them to the forefront, right? Kind of bringing them together as one collective voice and making sure that the industry and that the larger, context of our society is, incorporating them and affirming them and creating safe spaces for those people to participate and to exist. So I've been super busy with getting that up and, out into the world. I was just up in Canada. I had my first trip to Canada, and I went up to Whistler to run a half marathon, the Whistler half. And that was like the most beautiful, I told my friend yesterday, I was like, that was the most beautiful route I've ever run. And it was it's just like, I honestly am speechless when I tried to describe this route. They just posted some photos from the race, and I was going back and trying to remember and just remember myself running through that course, as I was scrolling through these photos, and it was one of those things where you just feel so lucky. You feel so fortunate to be out, in that space in the wilderness. As a non, I was participating in a non-binary division, right? So I got to participate as my authentic self. Really, just this beautiful connection to myself and to the land and to the folks that were running with me. So yeah, just some really wonderful things. And then I'm about to head out to Chicago in about a week. I'm speaking at a conference down there about queer inclusion and non-binary divisions in the running industry. So just a few couple things here and there.
Just the odd, yeah, the odd thing to do here and there. And you're also not long. When was Boston? Oh, that's probably a couple of months ago now. Hey, you also
Yeah, Boston was in April, right?
April.
So couple months ago. Yeah, Boston was what talk about a wild experience. I mean, it was so everything was just so big, right? There was just so many people, and it was just this very large and grand experience. It was really a wonderful opportunity, though. I mean, it was the first year for their non-binary division, and myself and a few other folks were part of that inaugural year. And we organized a queer shakeout before the race, so we got together the day before and did a quick little run, and then we got to see each other at the start line, at the finish line, right? Like it was a really wonderful experience, A, because it's the Boston Marathon, but B, because we got to do it with this community of queer and non-binary individuals. And really, I think we all had a really wonderful, positive experience. And that just speaks volumes to, the team at Boston Athletic Association, but also, the other participants and volunteers that were there. So a really challenging race. The second half of it's basically all uphill, I felt like. And I live here in Seattle, right? There's a ton of hills. I do elevation every day, but that elevation really hits you.
Yeah.
And it was really challenging, but so worth it. And I'm just so fortunate to have had the opportunity to do that.
Awesome. I think it's so great to hear about Boston, not just the race, but also your experience, the pre-event, the post-event, because it's so easy to get caught up in all of the depressing things that are happening in the world. I was just checking the translegislation.com website, and there's like 500 anti-trans bills in the US, not federal ones. This is all across the state ones. A whole bunch have been rejected, which is great, but there's a whole lot still in play. We have to talk about that because we need to understand the reality we're in. But I also think it's super important to talk about the fact that people are organizing, and we're also having wins, and we need to talk about and celebrate those as well. And I know sports is just one arena, but yeah, it's great to hear about Boston and the inspiring things that have happened, because then it helps us think about all the stuff we've still got to do.
Yep. No, I completely agree. We were just saying, right? Like Pride Month this year is a lot different because of the political climate that we're in. It adds this. It raises the stakes, like I said earlier, right? It really has created this really dangerous space, right? In this time when we're supposed to be celebrating, right? We're supposed to be, thinking back to this history of this queer community that has gone through a lot of really painful, traumatic experiences. This is a time when we should be thriving, a time when a lot of us feel like, oh, we've gotten to this really great place, yet all of this legislation is being introduced, and it really feels like we're stepping back, right? It feels like we're being pulled back into the past, when all we really were thinking of was continuing to move forward. And so, yeah, it's a really challenging time over here, and it's really hard as an advocate, as a queer person, as a friend and a chosen family member of so many other queer individuals who are going through this really challenging time. I mean, especially for folks who are at the intersection of other marginalized communities, right? Like the BIPOC community and, the intersection of that community and the queer community. it's so it there are a lot of people out there that are not safe, right? There's someone I follow online. Their name is Aaron Reed, and they have this. They follow basically all of the legislation, and they put out these maps that show like the areas of the United States that are not safe, right? That trans people should not be traveling to, should not be, staying or residing in, because it is not safe, because the legislation that has been passed is really creating this hostile environment. So it's a really challenging time. And it's hard to balance that, right? It's hard to, take care of yourself, take care of your community, while at the same time trying to be like this representation, trying to continue to push for change in our industry, and hoping that maybe some of that will spill over into, society as a whole. It's really challenging. It's something I didn't expect to kind of fall into, right? Like, I never thought I'd be like falling into this life of advocating and whatnot, but then to also add this other layer of all of this legislation and this work that is actively working against us, just makes for a very challenging time. Just
Yeah,
to put it, in the fewest of words, a very challenging time.
absolutely. Absolutely. We I feel like sending virtual hugs from for wild places to you, Jake. It's we're too far away. Anyway,
Yeah,
we
thank
have
you. Thank you so much.
hmm, we uh we have like, often the political situation in Australia kind of reflects and trails what's going on in the US. We've got we've got similar stuff going on here that we might have time to go into if we've got time here today. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I won't get pulled off on that. I'll just I'll head into. I was thinking about the trail community, and how I think the trail community considers itself pretty open-minded, pretty welcoming and inclusive. But the world that you were just talking about, the trail community exists in that broader society that has a bunch of problems and issues going on. So if you don't mind, are you able to give us an overview of the problem experienced by non-binary athletes in running?
Yeah. I think I would even kind of take it back a little bit wider and think about just running in general to start. So many people, they think of running as this sport that is accessible and inclusive. All you need is a pair of shoes. Yet, ask any marginalized community within the sphere of sport or run, and running, obviously, but just sport in general too. Like, it's not that simple. The running specifically has been built by and for white, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied men, and we're continuing to push for inclusion of all other identities and people, right? I mean, it's wild. I was in New York at the marathon last year, and I was on this panel, and we were talking about the inclusion of women and non-binary folks, because it was the 50th anniversary of women having been allowed to officially register and participate in, basically in running in the United States. With Boston Marathon, that would have been 72, yeah, 1972. So it's just like, it boggles my mind that even just 50 years ago, just before that, right, women weren't allowed to participate in this sport, right? Like, that's not that long ago. And so there's so much more work to be done, specifically, getting folks into the industry, from the BIPOC community, from, athletes with disabilities. And then, then you add on this whole other layer of this industry. To be able to participate in it, for the most part, you have to basically label yourself as a specific gender. Most of the time, you have two options, right? It's the gender binary of either men or women. So for folks who exists outside of the gender binary, in between the gender binary, you know, kind of anywhere but the gender binary of men and women, where do they go? Right? How do they get to participate in this sport as their authentic self? Right? They sure they can register and participate in one of these buckets, but like at the end of the day, that just opens up this whole other door to harassment and this dysphoria and this negative experience that they shouldn't have to do. Right? Their cis counterparts aren't having to do that, so why should they have to? So you know, there's work to be done. We're seeing a lot of progress in the road running industry. You know, we're seeing this really great progress with the major marathons, right? So Boston and New York, Chicago, London. And that obviously has an effect on the races, you know, the more local and regional races. And that's been really great, right? We're seeing non-binary divisions. We're seeing, you know, I now have, like you said at the beginning, I have this resource where race directors can use this resource to implement non-binary divisions and, you know, create this really exciting, positive, affirming experience for non-binary participants. And, you know, that also goes into like, to get there, obviously, we had to have companies and you know, registration platforms had to build out their software, right, to include non-binary participants. When you then start to think about the trail community, right, the trail and ultra community, I think what we were seeing and what was the impetus for that open letter that you mentioned was this really exciting progress is happening in the road running community, but it's not happening in the trail and ultra community. And so, yeah, sure, the existing culture might be one that is a bit more inclusive and welcoming and, you know, accepting of all folks, but the structure, right, the foundation, the systems of trail and ultra running hadn't yet caught up to what road running was doing. And so that's where the open letter that we published was really trying to focus on, right? Like we needed to get the attention of, you know, Ultra Sign Up, which is the registration platform that a lot of trail and ultra races here in the United States use. That platform still hadn't made the changes to their software. So even though races wanted to have non-binary divisions, the programs they were using, the software that they had in place, was not allowing them to do so. So we started having conversations, and, you know, I think Ultra Sign Up was getting a lot of pressure from all corners of the industry. And I'm actually pretty sure now, just earlier this month is when they rolled out the next phase. So now races in the trail and ultra community who use Ultra Sign Up can implement non-binary divisions, right? They can have non-binary participants participate, be, you know, they won't be misgendered throughout the process of registration and participation and awards and results. You know, obviously there's still more work to do, and I think they've got a few different blog posts that summarize all of that. But that's where, you know, when we think about where we were just a few months ago, trail running was still kind of lagging behind because of that. Now that we have that, now that there is this push for, you know, kind of continuing the work that we're doing in the road running community in the trail and ultra space, I'm really excited about where things are going. And, you know, I mentioned Whistler Marathon or Whistler Half Marathon earlier. You know, I was able to participate in this race, and I'm just so grateful for the race organizers because it was just such a wonderful experience. And people always ask me, they're like, you know, why is this important, right? Like, why do we need to include non-binary divisions? Like, why does that matter? Well, it matters because all participants are showing up to a race, showing up to the start line with anxiety and fear and worry about, you know, oh, that you know, thing that I've been worrying about, right? Like whether it's like a PR or it's, you know, this, oh, my leg is a little sore today, or, oh, you know, I'm not feeling too well, you know, my stomach, or there's so many different factors that participants are having to deal with at the start line. Now, as a trans or a non-binary person, if you're not being able to participate in a division that is going to, you know, gender you correctly, or, you know, refer to you and use your correct pronouns and, you know, create this positive experience for you, right? If you're having to worry about all of that on top of what you're all, you know, what everyone else is already worrying about and dealing with, it just becomes this it's this domino effect of it just gets harder and harder to bring your full self to that race or to that experience. So I did Whistler, and it was just so wonderful to not have to worry about any of that. And Whistler is doing some wonderful things with respect to, like, diversity, equity, and inclusion at their race. They started introducing different types of awards. They started to introduce these different policies and practices, and there's some really great stuff happening. And I think people should be really excited about where not only trail and ultra running can go, but running and sport can go in general.
Great answer. I just think, yeah, that experience, it really resonates. And it's really interesting, that 50-year anniversary of women basically being included, because when I thought about that, I've started using that as just part of the argument when talking to people, because it just kind of feels like we're at a similar moment where and if you compare it, a lot of people would be like, oh my God, well, of course that makes sense. So I'm going to open my mind to this change as well. And actually, I feel like the fact that the Boston Marathon has done it, I don't think you can argue now that the event's too big and complex to do now.
Yeah, I guess I could say too, with respect to, like, the trail community, I think a lot of the time people think, oh, to do this work, to create a more inclusive space, or to, update your policies and your practices, your culture, you need to be a big race, right? You've got to have a big budget, and you've got to have a team to do this. And, in some respects, that's true, right? If you want to do a lot of work, right? If there's a lot of different initiatives you want to take on, and, you want to really throw a bunch of resources at it, that's great. And I'm glad that there are races out there that can and are willing to do that. But if you're a smaller race, right? If you're a trail race, you're organizing it with your community, or it's a smaller group or the participant field is a little bit smaller. That doesn't mean that you can't do this work, right? Like, every race is different. Every event is unique and specific to that community and to that area of the country or the world. And that to me is the exciting part. When I wrote the guide, I was very careful not to be too prescriptive. I didn't want to be like, okay, here's exactly what you have to do, right? Like step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you're done. I kept it a bit more open, because I know that all these events are different, right? I can't say this is how you do it, because it's not going to be the case for every single event. Every event has to kind of figure out what works best for them. And that to me is the exciting part, because you, as the organizers of this event, or you as the group of people that are working toward this goal, really get to cater the experience and get to create the most authentic solution for you and for your community, for your event. And that to me is what's exciting about this. And so I just want to, like, caution race organizers or people who kind of doubt that they're able to do this work because, oh, they don't have the money or the budget, the time, the staff, the people. No, there are so many things that you can just do as one person today that can make a better experience for the non-binary community, the queer community, and all participants in general. That's the key point of all of this, is that as you start to think more strategically and not strategically, oh, what's the word? As you start to think more holistically about your event, right, and about the existing systems and practices and policies, as you start to kind of audit those and create more inclusive solutions, or try to figure out how to make them better, not only is that going to affect the non-binary community, or the whatever community you're trying to help, or to make the sport more accessible for, you're going to start to then notice things that are going to affect all people, the straight cis white men, right? Like, you're going to start to find things in your event that you're going to be like, oh, I never really thought of that before, because you never took the time, you never had the allowed yourself the space to think, about these different components, right? These different things that maybe you've been doing for this way for, years at this point, right? It's about taking the time, looking at your event, looking at the things that you are doing, and asking yourself, asking those in the community that it affects, what could be better about this? And that is, to me, the exciting part. That's the part where we really get into how we can start to shape the future of this sport and the future of the industry.
Mm, totally. Totally. Oh, and I hope we can be part of, because we're predominantly a trail running group.
Mhm.
Yeah, I hope we can be, a positive part of that conversation going forward. Hey, Jake, I was just thinking, like, I really get the importance of adding a division now, and I think partly it's because we all exist in this broader society that has a whole bunch of issues going on. But longer term, like, is gender even the best way to categorize winning and losing and whatever? Like, because when you do start to just relax and think about it, it's actually pretty random. Like, if you want to compare like to like, there are a whole lot of things you could do, but we're so stuck on gender. Like, yeah, so like long term, what's your take on that?
Ooh, it's a big question, and I have thought a lot about it. I will preface this with saying I have not come to any conclusion. I have simply just tossed around some ideas. Um, but I think I agree with you in that there has to be there has to be a more there's got to be a more creative way. There's got to be a way that we can, create divisions, create a process and a way of categorizing and recognizing participants based on something that isn't gender. Because what we're seeing with gender is that we're running into these issues, right? We're running into the inclusion of all these different people because gender is not just two buckets, it's not just three buckets, it's an entire spectrum. So how do you create divisions based on that? And so I've had a lot of thoughts about possible solutions, and I wonder, in the running world, it's so much of what we do is based on timing, and I have a feeling that there could be a solution where we start to look more at um, anticipated finishing times, or pacing, or creating divisions based on your potential, athletic ability or athletic performance. So, for example, to kind of make this a little bit easier, there was a race that happened. I'm going to forget the city, but it was up in Canada during their Pride Month or their Pride event. I'm I'm so bad. Why am I forgetting this? I think it was Ontario, but I think it was Calgary. It was Calgary. Um, Anyways, they had this event where instead of dividing based on division or based on gender, they created divisions based on the participants' estimated finishing time, right? So they, at the point of registration, were provided with, I think they called them heats, and basically we're saying like, oh, for this race, which I think it was maybe like a 5K. They had 4 different divisions, and each division was an allocated amount of time, or was like a bracketed amount of time. And when you registered, you had to select which division you basically self-select and put yourself into the division in which you anticipate finishing within. And then that's how they scored, right? That's how they were able to, do like first, second, third, right? Was looking within those divisions, right? So those divisions then were made up of all different genders, right, and abilities, because it wasn't focused on that. It was just focused on the timing, right? Because at the end of the day, like, that's what the race was prioritizing, right? It was not gender; it was the athletic ability, or the timing of the participants. Um, Another thing that we think about when it comes to timing is I'm I'm really bad at it, but pacing is a huge critical part of running. And one of the things that we did, I think it was last year with Seattle Frontrunners, is we had an event where we created teams, and each team had to basically select a pace, right? I think the distance once again was like a 5K, or it was a, you know, a couple miles, and the group of 3 or 4 had to select a pace, and then you set off on this course, right? As a group, you have to stay together, and you have to stick to that pace for the entire race, right? So you could choose a, you know, 6.5 minute pace. You could do an 8 minute pace. You could do a 10 minute pace. You could do a 13 minute pace, and it was scored at the end based on who got the closest to their predicted or selected pace, right? So that is a really exciting opportunity to bring in people who, you know, it's not about the fastest, it's actually about who can be the most precise with the pacing of that race. And, you know, what a wonderful, you know, creative idea that you would never really think about, right? When you think about like the Boston Marathon, to have an event maybe that does something more closer to that could be a really exciting, you know, change of pace when looking at possible solutions. So, you know, I think there's a lot. I think, you know, when you look at other sports, they do, you know, you look at like wrestling, right? They're dividing or creating divisions. I mean, granted, they are creating gender divisions, but then they're also creating, I think that their classes, or, you know, it's based on body weight, right? And trying to pair like versus like. You know, and this, I'm sure people will come back and be like, okay, well, that's why, you know, we should be creating divisions based on sexes, right? Because, oh, sex is assigned at birth, you know, one is faster and one is slower. Well, in reality, like there's so many other factors that go into that, and there's what we know within each of the, well, also sex is not just binary, right? Like there's intersex, right? There's once again another spectrum over there. To say that, you know, this sex assigned at birth is much faster, this sex is much faster, it's wild because there are so many different factors, right? And so once again we run into this issue of trying to create this like versus like scenario within these sexes that are so are so what do you call it, complex, right? There's so many different there's so much variety within each of those. So you run into another issue there. So anyways, at the end of the day, what I think is exciting about creating non-binary divisions is I view it as this is like it's a phased approach, right? Like this is the next phase. This is how we evolve this industry to the next level, because yes, it's creating space for non-binary folks to participate, and that's wonderful, but it's also starting to open up the industry's mind to recognize that gender is not just men and women, that, you know, sex is assigned at birth, it's not just male and female, right? It's starting to introduce this fact, right? This reality that other people exist between those lines, outside of those lines. And so to create a sport, you know, specifically with just two options, it's not ideal, and it's not the reality we live in. So I think it's just what it's doing, creating these non-binary divisions, is it's creating this wonderful opportunity for those athletes, and that's awesome, but it is also subtly, right, like opening up the conversation and getting folks to kind of start thinking more creatively about why we do, or why the sport is set up the way it is. So yeah, I don't know if that made any sense, but those are some of the thoughts floating around in my head.
No, that's a cool answer. I think yeah, and I think there's some homework for everyone checking into this chat about what other creative ways could we use to categorize. And that pacing one, I was thinking that's potentially, it's a really cool idea that potentially makes the race a whole lot more competitive, because literally every single person could plan to win if you care that much about winning. Because if it's just speed,
Yeah.
like, you know, 80-90% of people know they're not winning or even podiuming. But something like that pacing thing where you say the pace and you try and stick to it, like literally everybody can have a crack at the win. So anyway,
well, and sorry to interrupt, but I think like in that moment, what I'm reminded of is as I'm preparing for this presentation I'm giving next week, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is, so much focus when we talk about even just like non-binary divisions, right? The first thing people think of is like awards and prize money, right? Like front runners, breaking tape and, getting on the podium and getting awards and prize money. And yes, that is so important, and it must be part of the solution. But at the end of the day, like those who are at the front of the race, the front runners who are, getting the prize money, getting the podium opportunities and breaking tape and whatnot, like it's a very, very small percentage of the participant field. I mean, think about, Boston Marathon, where it's like 40,000, 50,000 people. Like that's a very small amount of people that you're catering to. And yes, that's important and it needs to happen. But what are the ways? And this is why I was mentioning Whistler, because they do this really well. Like, what are the ways you start to think about all of the participants and provide opportunities and spaces for them to be recognized, to thrive, to beat their own personal goals? Right? There's just so many different opportunities, I think, when you start to look at the entire event, all participants. It's this idea of like creating solutions and experiences not for a few but for the whole, right? All people are equally deserving of this wonderful experience and the opportunity to win an award or prize money or whatever they may be coming to that race for. They should be able to have that opportunity. And I think there's so much. Part of me is kind of like, gosh, I got to become a race director because like I want to try out some of these ideas. But I'm like, with what time, Jake? What time would you be able to do that?
That's right. Just add that to your plate.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, now I've got more questions, but I need to back off a bit. I'm taking up too much time. If anyone else would like to ask Jake a question, please feel free to jump in, or if you're finding it hard to jump in, type in the chat or stick your hand up in the Zoom. If I get time, I'll come back with more questions. But anyone else have any questions?
Oops. Oh no, unmute myself. There we go. Yes, I do have a question. I feel like I'd had a question before, but you kind of answered it, Jake, around like what comes first, like the chicken or the egg in terms of money, or like especially for those bigger races. So that's where I totally agree that like, we've got the Pilliga Ultra coming up and we've added a non-binary category because that was something that, Will and others kind of said, wouldn't this be great? And but then like you've kind of got me thinking, and I've just downloaded your guide, like it's not only actually doing that, but following that up with making sure the correspondence and everything we send out is inclusive as well. Because I know that people can get lazy thinking, tick that box, we've added the category, but then not actually following that up with making those people feel included and, as equal as anyone else at the event. But I guess my question is, so for Pilliga and we've recently had our first camp, we encourage people to apply for scholarships or to kind of approach us for a discounted entry, because we really want to make, like, we're a non-for-profit. We're not here to make, bucket loads of money, but we want to cover event costs. And often, on any event fee is a bit of fat that can be trimmed to, So we want to make sure that we're allowing opportunities for people that, they might say, I'd love to do this event, but I can't afford to get there, or I can afford the race fee, but not the, all the things that come along. But we find that we don't have as many people actually asking for that. I guess, do you have any advice for us in terms of how do we like offer that, but then what else can we be doing to actually encourage people to take us up on that offer and know that it is a genuine offer and it's not just, us saying that because it's a nice thing to do, but we generally want to be able to, we want people to say, hey, because we have, for example, have free entry for First Nations people, and we're like, that's a blanket, but also like we have very few people taking us up on that. So how do we, encourage the take up of these initiatives in a way that can kind of add to our community, and that these people can actually come along and be part of our events and be like, that was awesome. I'm going to bring more of my, you know, my mates along to this because I get to run in a category that represents who I am. And, you know, I walked away with a medal, and, you know, unfortunately we don't offer prize money, but, you know, lots of high fives and kudos.
Yeah. No, it's a really good question. And you are right. I'll first acknowledge that you are correct in that, you know, just implementing a non-binary division is the first step, right? Like there's a whole list of things. I mean, look at my guide and you'll see all these different things. And that's, you know, that's where I think a lot of races can get stuck, right? Is they'll flip on the non-binary option and then they'll stop, right? They're like, oh, we did the work, great, pat ourselves on the back and move on. But what they don't realize is that by turning that option on, you're actually then taking on this responsibility. Because when someone from the non-binary community sees that option, you know, when registering for your race, it's almost it is an invitation to come to the race, right? And so by turning that option on, and now is your responsibility to make sure that those who register and come to participate in your race have a positive and affirming experience at your race. Because if your intention is to grow this division, right, and to bring more people in, you want those people to have a good experience and to go away, right? You said to their friends and say like, hey, I ran this really exciting race. Like you should do it next year, or you should do, you know, the next event that comes up. That's where, like, yes, create the division, but then also look at all of the other things, right? The internal, the structure and the practices and behavior and culture of your event, and make sure that you're also doing the work there. When it comes to the like the promoting, right, and inviting folks in, I think it starts with you know, really kind of sticking to your word, right? When you do this work, it is very easy to tell typically when, for example, someone just turns the registration option on and then like does nothing else. Like you look at their policies, or you look at, you know, the things that they're posting online, or, you know, past participants, and like, were there any other non-binary folks who participated in the event, right? Like it's easy to tell if someone hasn't done the work. And so I think that's a first place to start, right? Is to do the work and to continue to do the work, because eventually that will bring people in. Make sure that people know about it. I think a lot of races, they get into this they get stuck because they implement the division, they're working on creating a more inclusive space, but then they don't want to like promote that, because they don't want to seem like they are, you know, like, oh, look at us, you know, we're doing the work. And I think there's a way to do that without sounding like that, right? There's definitely a way to not necessarily announce, but to share that this is something that is important to you as an organization, right? This is in line with our values. This falls into our purpose. And, you know, this is the work we're committed to. And so I think that's the first step, but then also going one step further and meeting the community that you're trying to bring into your event, meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, that's
right. So yes, you can post things online, and like that makes things, you know, sort of more efficient, but also brings up other challenges. I recommend to people all the time, go to your local queer nonprofit community center, go to schools, right? Like I think about here in the US, a lot of like colleges and universities have oh my god, what are they called, GSAs, right, where they're basically these like clubs of queer students, right? Go to the places where the queer folks are and share with them, invite them in, right? Share with them that you have these discounts, or even, you know, as you start this process, I always talk about the importance of representation. I think it's really important if you bring someone into the process from the beginning, and then that person can also help you to like open up the event to their network, right? Like there's so many different ways that you can start to kind of subtly bring people in and expose them to this experience without just like putting up a social media post and being
Yeah.
like, come run our race, you know, we did it. Yeah, and that's, to me, that's more meaningful, that's more authentic. If you were to go to, you know, an organization that, you know, is serving queer youth or is serving, you know, the queer community in your city or your community or your country, right? Going to them and saying like, hey, here's this race, here's the work that we've been doing, this is why it's important to us, and here's how we want to help get you or your, you know, your community, your network to this event if you are interested, right? And I think that speaks volumes, you know, compared to like a social media post.
Totally. And that's what we're, I guess, more committed to doing, is trying to identify these leaders within like diverse, you know, diverse voices who are leaders within their community, you know, fostering a genuine relationship with them. And it's not when we need them or when we want them to do something. It's like trying to put the time in so that way when something comes around and we say, hey, we're doing this event, they're like, yep, I'm happy to share it with my community because I've kind of vetted you and know that you come from a genuine place. And I totally understand that, you know, there is that sense of uncertainty because so many people must get, you know, now it's like you said, there's more people, especially around Pride Month, you know, who are like, let's do this. And it's like, is that just pride washing? Or, you know, it's like, we got to kind of do the work to that way be seen as being genuine. And but yeah, you've like you said, social media is easy, the easy thing to do, but it doesn't actually mean anything. Like it's not.
Well, and I think, you know, social media can be really effective, and I think the way to go about the way to approach social media is, it's not about, you know, putting up a post and saying like, we've created a non-binary division, right? It's about doing the work that we just talked about. But what you can do on social media is when you're, you know, marketing for your event, right? When you're posting photos and, you know, sharing like the top finishers from the event, if the non-binary folks or the queer folks or whichever, you know, community you are trying to help elevate, if they're okay with you sharing photos, share photos, include the non-binary top finishers with your, you know, all other finishers, right? Or if you're just sharing a post and like talking about Global Running Week or talking about whatever, it's okay to have like a non-binary person or a trans person or a queer person in that post. Like that's another way where like it's a subtle thing that when the queer community sees that, they know that that's a space for them. That is especially if that person is like, you know, you see the queer joy and you see that they're thriving and having a great time, like that's going to bring me in. Like that's where social media I think can be effective, right?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Thanks for that, Jake. That's I've already got you've got the cogs turning in a bit.
Good.
I've got a question if I can jump in. We've still got some time.
Hi, Riley.
Hey, Jake. Nice to meet you properly.
Yes, nice to meet you in virtually over the camera.
I've got so many questions, but I'll just pick one of them because I'm conscious of the time. I'm wondering what's the biggest like practical roadblock that you encounter when you do this advocacy with races or organizing, timing, people, like whatever, the biggest roadblock that you encounter, and then what you do to overcome that and get people on board.
Ooh, I think it's twofold. I think there are two things that race organizers, beyond, I mean, I think first of all, the hardest thing is getting to people and getting them to just open up their hearts and open up their minds, right? To, you know, the people out there who are like, oh, trans or non-binary people, they don't exist. And it's just men and women. It's like that, beyond that, which is a challenge in and of itself. Those who are willing to do the work and who want to, you know, create a more inclusive space, the two big things that always come up are budget and being afraid, right? Being scared of the work or being scared of making a mistake, basically. So I think the first one, the budget option or the budget roadblock, is is actually, I think, a pretty easy solution. There's a couple ways you can go about it. And when we talk about budget, I think a lot of people are thinking about like prize money and awards, right? Like, oh, if we're going to create another division, that just means we have to like supply another set of awards and prize money. And yes, that's true, right? Like all divisions should have an equitable opportunity to get the prize money or awards, whatever your event offers. If you're adding another division and you are not able to expand your budget, right? You're not able to reallocate resources or move things around to kind of accompany that addition, then you have to, I mean, if you're truly going to be equitable, you take the existing budget for 2 divisions and you split it across 3. Like, it's as simple as that, right? You split it across, the percentage of, or the makeup of these different divisions. Or you can use this opportunity to grow your budget, right? To expand upon the resources for this new division. A lot of the time, funding is coming in from companies or is coming in from sponsors, right? Like the funding for these races a lot of the time is coming from external stakeholders. So if you're going to create a non-binary division, right? If your event is truly committed to creating a more inclusive space, use that as your talking point when you go to get new sponsors. Tell them, like, we are creating this division. We are truly committed to growing and expanding the access to this industry and to this sport. Do you, as so-and-so company, want to support that initiative? Like, that is where we need funding. That is where we need assistance. And a lot of the time, like, that's what companies get excited about. That's where they want to, put their money or put their support. So that's the budget thing. The other one that I think is a bit more complex to some degree is this idea of like, I really want to do this, but I'm scared. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to be canceled. I don't want to do the wrong thing. And that is fair. It is something I think all humans have to deal with, with big decisions and changes in their lives or in their work. But at the end of the day, we won't get anywhere. Like, we're not going to make any progress if you don't take that initiative, if you don't step into that space, if you don't move forward into the unknown. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it can be challenging, and not knowing what the outcome might be can be really intimidating. And I understand that, but it's not a good enough excuse to not do the work. And on top of all this, like, look at all of the races that have already done this, right? Like, I keep a database on my website that has like 200 plus races in the United States alone that have done this work. So there are races and organizations you can look to, you can consult, you can bring in people like me, people from the community as, a consultant, as that representation, to make sure that you are making decisions that are in line with both your values and your intentions, but also with what the community that you're catering to needs, right? You can talk to the trans community, you can talk to the non-binary community, and figure out, like, what are the things you're looking for in this division or at this event, and how can we make sure that we are implementing the most authentic solutions. So yeah, it is this kind of like, I just have to kind of like lift people up and help them through that sometimes. But, at the end of the day, we're all going to make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, but that's how you're going to learn. That's how we're going to move forward. And that's how we continue to grow and evolve this sport so that all participants are able to show up and, participate as their full authentic selves.
Awesome. I'm just going to call a quick timeout. Just because we're approaching the end of the session here. Folks, Jake is a passionate runner, but they're also possibly their first passion is musical theatre. And I did raise this with Jake beforehand. I'm not putting them on the spot, but I was hoping we could have a bit of a performance in our trail chat. And excellent, getting some claps there. So, Jake, please take it away.
I, first of all, cannot believe I'm about to do this. When you asked me this, I was like, I literally told you, I was like, no one has ever asked me this before on any sort of, platform like this. So thank you, I guess. Yeah, so if you go to my social media, there's all sorts of, theater and music, and I'm obsessed with TikTok. It's probably not healthy, but anyways. So today I was just going to sing a little snippet from a song that I think really fits into the context of Pride Month and the queer community, and kind of in this world where we're getting a lot of legislation, right? These discriminatory legislation and policies that are kind of being pushed upon us, and also like for myself, right? Like I've been really starting to notice this divide, right? And getting, when I was going to Boston, right, like was getting a lot of people online that were, sending these terrible messages my way, right? Like there is so much hate and divide out there that's trying to really knock down the non-binary community, the trans community, the queer community. So I was just going to sing this little snippet from this song that's written by one of my favorite duo composers, Pasek and Paul. So yeah, here we go. When the sharpest words want to cut me down, I'm gonna send a flood, gonna drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me. There it is.
Is that the greatest? What's
that is the greatest showman? Yes.
I love it.
This is me, Pasek and Paul, Kayla Settle, all greats in my mind.
I feel like we need more crossover of like running and musical theater. Like it just doesn't, there's not enough of it in this world.
I do a lot of like running and singing at the same time. I can't promise that it's good, but like that crossover kind of exists in my daily life. So maybe I need to start bringing that to the forefront.
Like when you're feeling shit on a run, like especially, if you're out there for a long time, a good a good tune, especially a ballad, something you can sing along with, is really a good way to get the feet moving and the lungs, even more exhausted.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jake. I love that. What a way to finish.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. I follow you on IG, and I just thought it was a no-brainer. We had to ask, so.
Thank you.
We could probably be a bit cheeky. We've got a couple of minutes left. Riley, I'm conscious you had a bunch of questions, but only got to ask one. Did you want to ask another one?
I am going to try and organize to have a chat with Jake another time about some of this stuff. So I might save them all for then rather than, getting too far past 1 o'clock.
No, no worries at all. If we can help connect anyone to Jake, and if that's okay with Jake, let us know. That goes for folks here and also folks tuning in on YouTube. Shane, I assume you're a bit swollen to ask any questions.
Thanks for your time, Jake, and your openness and honesty. It's really appreciated.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to second that, Jake. Like you've put in so much time to like create resources, and it's just the work. I just wonder how you like have time to, go running or do anything that's not like fighting the good fight. So I'm very keen to get stuck into your guide. And I think that like Will was saying, Australia is often like kind of 10 years behind everywhere else. So I feel like we're in a good position to like, rather than make 10 years of mistakes, just kind of jump, get ahead. And I definitely feel like, we've got a lot to learn, but we're trying to implement that for wild places and show that it can be done. And yeah, like I said, I reckon that list of, it's so cool you've got that list of events that are inclusionary, because I reckon in Australia you could probably, from the top of my head, count them on one hand. You know, we've got a long way to go, and someone's got to start, like, you know, heading in the right direction. And Riley, I'm keen to, talk to you as well and find out where you're based and what your story is and how we can, like all learn together essentially, because the more the merrier in this space. And thank you, Jake, for the amazing amount of work you do. I'm truly amazed and exhausted just thinking about it.
It's been a wild few years. But it is, I tell people all the time, like, what gets me going, you know, with this work, right? When I think about running, you know, running to me is this connection, right? And I think for a lot of us is a connection to ourselves. It's a connection to a community, and it's a connection to the land, right? And all of us should be able to experience that connection. And you know, there are so many policies or systems or, you know, structures and foundation that can get in the way, right? These exclusive spaces that are created, or these, you know, these discriminatory policies, right? That gets in the way of that connection that we all deserve, that we all crave. And my goal as an advocate, as just being that representation, is to make sure that not only do I get to experience that, and do the people, you know, in my community get to experience that, but it's the next generation, right? It's the next group of people that are coming into this sport. We have to make sure that it continues to grow and continues to become a better space so that more people can access it and can experience that connection that, you know, that I love, that so many other people, you know, are you know, craving and literally running after. And so I ask, you know, for anyone listening to really take the time to think about, you know, what running means to you, and how you could, you know, do, or what you could do, what you are able to do in your community, or, you know, in your school or your organization, to help further this movement, to help make sure that this sport continues to become more welcoming and inclusive, because we all just want to participate. We all want to be our authentic selves in these spaces, and it is entirely possible. We just have to do the work to get there.
Preach.
Snap.
That was, that's just the best note to end on. I'm going to skip my sum up, because let's just
Sorry, I stole your thunder there.
Do not apologize. That was bloody lovely. Folks, we should finish up though on that note. Please check out for Wild Places, wildplaces.com. Check out the Pilliga Ultra coming up in September, the East Gippsland Ultra coming up in November, and a bunch of other events in between. Check out membership if you wouldn't mind. Becoming a member of For Wild Places really helps us cover our costs and get through the day-to-day, and help us do what we do. But the biggest thanks goes to Jake. Thank you so much for tuning in late at night from over there in Seattle. All the best for 2023 and beyond. We hope to stay in touch. In fact, we might even ask you back for another trail chat and performance in the future.
Maybe we'll add a piano next time. We'll just keep getting better.
Hey, we might need to improve our kind of sound and tech. But,
Fair. Well, hey, thank you so much. And you know, I am super excited for y'all to continue to dive into this, and I'm here as a resource to you, to anyone that's listening. You know, you can find me over at nonbinaryrunning.com. You can also find the organization I mentioned in the beginning, the Queer Running Society, at queerrunningsociety.com. And then I'm also all over socials at Jake Fedorowski. So I'm you know, if you like musical theater, if you like running, and you like a little bit of hiking and dog situation, give me a follow.
Brilliant. So look Jake up, and Hill, hopefully we can put all those links and everything down below in the YouTube vid. That's great. All right. Thanks so much, folks. Have a great day. Stay safe. Happy trails. Look after each other. And see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.